Over to you, Greg.
Hello, everyone. This is a session to talk about value stream mapping. So it's nice to see all your faces. It's kind of like emerged as a very interesting topic for all of us. I think about a week ago, I posted a question on Brickhoff's Bridge group, saying that I ran a session to explore value stream mapping with a client, and it was a bit of a bumpy ride, and I just kind of like made my own format, and I used a few techniques, which I can talk to you about if you like. And then it was all virtual. There were the people located in different continents, I believe, and it went relatively well. But I just kind of like I did it on my own. I kind of put it together on my own and ran it. And I wanted to get the kind of the wisdom of the group about like things to look out for, things to think about, because I will be running it with another group, I think, very soon, and I want it to really, have a strong impact. And I've got all my own ideas about value streams and what they do for people. I have this. I have done it before several years ago, in a kind of a pure sense, and I've since explored Scaled Agile Framework, and they have their own take on it, right? Which is that sort of operational value stream and development value stream, where the agile release train always serves a development value stream. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of open it up and see what people think. I have a few things that I've done, just for context, with this group. I think I mentioned in the chat, but it was essentially, there was some system architects, there was mostly product managers, product owners, and scrum masters, and they're all working in a kind of early in their scaled agile journey, SAFe. I started with a rather lengthy warm up, which is that Tom Wojcik show me how to make toast. Has anyone ever seen that video? How do you make toast? Which is essentially using a kind of a visual approach and stepwise approach to communicate something, right? A process, and getting people to align around that process. And I wasn't quite sure if that fits nicely into a value stream mapping. So I want to get people's thoughts on that, because I struggled to make a strong connection between those, because I then went straight into, here's what a value stream is, blah, blah, blah. And then there's that, what else? There's a thing around defining a value stream, and then there's value stream mapping, which are two different things. So I want to make sure I have that right. And I have some thoughts around what does an operational value stream do for you versus what does a development value stream do for you. So I'm keen to know what people think of that. I don't want to open the kimono too much and give away too much. So I'll
Great.
I see a hand up with two hands up. So let's
yeah,
kick it
you
up.
have.
Toby, you were first.
Yeah, I'll just be brief. I mean, Toby's got his hand up as well. Toby, do you want to go first? I don't mind going second.
Yes, just a brief one. I haven't got that much experience of it, but I've run a couple of sessions. And first of all, it took ages, right? Which is perhaps reflective of how monstrous their process was. But I think you need to work out what level you go down to, I suppose, because the fidelity of the workshop, I suppose, is how deep you go. But the other thing that was really good for me was not so much the detail, but just visualizing the process. You could see how complex it was. Yeah. And also there was this kind of mad thing where we put rough timings to each of them, and you could see that defining the work took about twice as long as doing the work. And just that revelation was, to them, was really, it was to a client I was working with, was quite revelatory, I suppose. And I suppose it's almost, rather than the detail, the visualization was the really valuable thing. That was all I was going to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the message from the Making Toast video, right? Which is that.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah.
It has a strong impact. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's the conversation and the exercise that really drives the conversation. Well, with the benefits, rather than the output of a value stream, it's the collaboration points and the measure of ideas. Well, 2 points just on what you were saying, Greg, without going into too much detail. One is, I don't find the bread and toast analogy helpful personally when working with corporations and organizations, which are far more complex than repetitive processes. Like creating toast, right? Although, as I have learned, toast can be quite complex too, because you might want to have peanut butter on your toast, right? Or you might want to have this, you might want to have that. So maybe it's not that far fetched. But I have found when I've done the toast exercise in previous years, it's kind of landed flat. So what I now do, by the way, I take an example of the organization itself and look at a initiative or a project or something that's already been done in the organization, and then play on that. So at Adidas recently, what I did is they got a Run for the Oceans event every year, which is a global event where they collect plastic from different distribution centers across different countries, and then they create synthetic plastic and they combine that with like whatever, rubber, whatever, and they create trainers or clothing wear. It's something that everyone in Adidas is aware of, because for every year, for 12 days or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, there's this big global push on sustainability. So I created a map, which I'm more than happy to share with all of you today. I actually stole kindly from Jose Casal, and I need to reference him for that. And he done one about the dentist, about a kid going to a dentist and how the mother and the father had to like wait for the doctor's appointment, or then go up to the surgeon and they have to wait over 2 weeks for the operation. I thought that's getting closer, but it's still not giving my clients the real satisfaction about understanding the relationship between wait time and cycle time and all these dependencies to real life. So I actually done the Adidas Real Life Oceans event, and I basically just asked a group of people what actually happens from start to finish about how you create the memo, then you get some marketing budget, then you have to wait for a few weeks for the board to give you the funding, then you've got to collect the recycling, then you have to wait for the centers and travel or transport that thing, and you have to wait another 4 weeks. So we actually mapped it out, but we just literally done 10 steps. And you go to groups really, and you basically map out those groups in groups, right? And you basically put down red and green, literally. Is it waste? Is it not waste? Is it waste? Is it not waste? And then you can put amber as we just don't know. And hopefully you get this right. When you zoom out, you get a 100-day calendar. Imagine 7 rows going that way, or 10 rows going that way in 7 days. And people have literally physically put on the days that it's been wasted and the days been from start to finish. It's quite fun actually. And what you're doing there is you're creating openness about without even going into your own projects, your own value stream, you're making them think about waste, non-waste, and actually what's value added in terms of the end-to-end processes. But I'll stop there because I know that we've got 3 other hands up. So that's food for thought. I can share with you the mural. I'm happy to do that afterwards as well.
Thank you.
And I think we've got Noel and then Bart. I don't know who went first. I don't know how I find that out.
Fight for it. Are
Who
you
talks
muted?
first goes.
Whoever jumps in first.
Sorry, I thought I took myself off mute. The thing I strongly agree with is the power of the visualization. Just having a group of people co-create a view of what actually happens in their process or in their service is where the magic really is in this. You made a really good point on the chat last week, Haroon, about this shouldn't be done with a small group of people. This should be done with as many people that are involved as possible. Completely support that as well. But you can't argue with it. Once you've got it, it's not an opinion. People can't get emotional about it because it's just there. And we've all agreed this is what currently happens. So let's tap into it and see where the opportunities are to make it better. I love it. It's brilliant.
Well, yeah, just to clarify, I think some people had questions around the to be or the as is, and I always make sure that I'm doing the as is.
Absolutely, yeah, it's got to be the starting point. 100%.
Understood. And then only then when you do that mapping exercise, you find out, okay, where are the pain points? What are the possibilities for improvement? Go ahead, Bart.
I will try to be brief and quick. Making the toast exercise. Somebody did that with me years ago, but it was, I'm not sure if the video you're referring to was live or was silent collaboration. Mine, the one I participated in, was a silent collaboration. So even though I don't run it with people, I don't think there is a value in showing this to people. It influenced my thinking. So I rather do silent part of the exercise with people where they come up with the flow or this part of the flow they know about, and then they bring it together and discuss. They kind of put the stuff together, discuss, adjust, rather than wasting the time with the whole group and going piece by piece slowly. That's usually the dynamic that happens when we don't moderate it or facilitate it in a way. That's my experience. I would rather have them prepare parts and then join the puzzles rather than try to go through this painful process with everybody in the same room. That's
Yeah,
what
that
I
sounds a
wanted
lot
to add.
like that sounds a lot like 1, 2, 4 all. If you're familiar with that liberating structure, and I did for the toast. I asked them to each draw on paper what they would do, and then they got into breakout groups to come together around an agreed approach to making toast. So I did kind of do that, and then when it came to defining the value stream, I think we did the operational value stream together, where we understand what the customer is experiencing. And then let me just share this real quick. And then for the operational, I asked them to break into two groups let me just make sure I'm doing the right thing. No, this one. So give me a second. All right, let me stop sharing. Just I'm just trying to having trouble with the view. I'll come back to this. To break out into two groups in small groups to define that value stream together, and then come back as a large group for each group to present their version, and then to come together around an agreed version, like an aligned version. That really helps when you have, especially with a big group. If you had 40 people virtually, I'm not sure how well that would work, but I guess I'd do at least 4 breakout groups, or maybe even more, and try to do a version of that. And it would just take a bit longer, I suppose. Okay. Trying to do.
Whilst Greg's looking for that, the how to make toast, I get them to do it with how to make cocktails, but then I get them to make cocktails at the end of it, so they get a bit of engagement.
Nice.
Okay, good. I like cocktails.
Nice.
And there's mocktails as well. So those who don't drink, they get catered for as well.
Toby, go ahead, and then I'll talk through this thing that I did. Go ahead, Toby.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, one thing we were talking about the current process and the future process. One thing we did, and I think it was good, was we then did a subsequent session, which was like a future state thing, which was much quicker, which is how would you like the process to work, or how could it work? And then you had the current state and the future state, or idealized state. And then what we did is try to, it's a bit of a grand term, but try to identify interventions to move from one to the other, right? And that was reasonably successful. But the thing that did is, first of all, it encouraged this more experimental way of approaching things. So not that's the way to do it, go and do that, but let's try and get to this and see what works. And we also did it in a way where we found out all the things we couldn't do just within their organization for such and such a reason. We couldn't do this, we couldn't do this. So you actually kind of had a list of these kind of experiments or interventions, and you could highlight not possible, not possible, possible, high value, whatever it is. But then you could kind of say to the maybe senior folks or not so senior folks, look, we can't do this one because of this. You could unblock this, or you could enable this to happen, or whatever it might be. And that was just quite an interesting way to kind of take it forward, and also get them to think about what they could do and make it a bit more inspirational or aspirational, rather.
Very nice. Very nice. Yeah, I agree with all that. I think that's a really good idea. It's almost like a theory, what do you call it? Theory of change? Is that what it's called? You talk about a goal state, and then what are some steps that we can take to get to that goal state. This is some of what I put to the group, which is, some of it was a little bit of training style stuff. It's just like explaining the difference between operational and development. And this is my take on it. And I've got a take on this. I want to check it with this group. For me, the operational value stream is customer centric. And what it does for you is it helps you to understand what are the tools and systems and process that we use to deliver value to our customer. And then from that, we have an understanding of, okay, who are the people who support all these systems, and how do we need to think about the topology around that? Like, how do we need to think about shaping teams to deliver this stuff if we haven't thought about that already? And that of course you can do optimizations of the the stream as well, the value stream as well. But for me, it's about identifying the things that are needed and then shaping those teams. And then development value stream is very much about the process of delivering that value and finding bottlenecks and pain points. And so I provide examples, very simple examples here around, someone wants our products, you land the customer, you get a commercial agreement, they purchase our service, and then they receive the service. It's a super simple version, usually not that simple. That's a very simple version of the actual customer. And then down here is the development value stream is, okay, these are the systems that allow us to do that, right? So this is more about building features on the platform and stuff. So make a business case for a new feature, go into some discovery about what that could look like, defining the deliverable, delivery commitment. So in our case, that's like PI planning, do the development, QA, integrate testing, deployment stuff, accepting the feature and deploying it into the hands of the customer. So that was that. And then there is an example one of an actual value stream where you get that process time and lead time. And I created this little visual here to show you. I didn't make it like visually longer and shorter, but you do get the mathematical kind of take on it, which is you end up having a massive lead time for everything and a tiny, tiny process time. So actual hands-on work is teeny tiny, and the wait time is enormous, at least in this case. So, and then that's where you can start to identify pain points. Go ahead, someone.
Yeah, Christina's got a hand up, Greg.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I was just throwing the question out to everyone. So in my head, and when I think back to it, are there similarities to this just to kind of as is and to be process mapping that existed from eons ago? Is it the case that, because for me, when we were doing process mapping, that's still focused on the value, like, there was a value chain in process mapping. So I'm trying to see if this is just something by another name. And I've somewhat done this already, because it kind of seems like this is exactly as is to be process mapping. And also it seems kind of similar from like the lean perspective of when you're doing A4 problem solving and waste removal.
Sure, someone can take that. Go ahead.
So yeah, great question. The difference for me is the scale of it and the intent behind it. So I used to be a business analyst back in the day. I've done a lot of as is and to be process mapping, but generally that's for something very specific. So your context might be different, but for me, when I started doing value stream mapping, it was like, right, we're not just interested in this bit, we're interested in all of it and all of those upstream, like proper end to end. So that's, for me, the key difference is when you're doing a value stream map, it really is an end-to-end visualization of a product or a service.
I would add to that, Noel, for this exact project that I'm involved with, we started on defining this together, and then we had to stop and we had to reschedule a second follow-up session. And in the in-between, I got a message from one of the product managers, and they said, oh, well, the big boss said we need to be thinking about what is the value to the company, not the value to the customer, right? So I had to think about that and address that, which is, okay, value stream, especially operational value stream, is really about customer centricity. So you're kind of trying to drive that home as well, right? Which is thinking about value into the hands of the customer, always, obsessed with that, focused on that, because yes, it will deliver value to this company, but that is like a lagging indicator, right? So profit comes after you deliver a delightful experience. So that is another major, I think, shift or focus of this.
Greg, have you ever actually represented the wait time as an actual scalable to the actual time?
Like length.
So it's like 17 pages long.
You could, yeah. I mean, I'm quite early in my exploration of this type of mapping or defining the value streams, but I'm keen to somehow represent that. Maybe a scale version of it where you have like super slim process times and and larger wait times or something. But yeah, go ahead. Who was it first, Haroon or Noel? I'm not sure who got in first.
Haroon was in there before me.
You're muted.
Yeah, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. I was saying, if you want to go before me, Noel, if your conversation or question is aligned to what Greg's currently discussing and what Mike just mentioned, I can go after you. By the way, my one's a little bit connected, but not entirely.
Yeah. So mine's directly related to that. So I'll just do it quickly.
Okay,
And
do that, please. Yeah.
There's they use this metric in Kanban called flow efficiency. So rather than having it as like a visual representation, you can work it out as a percentage and say what your flow efficiency is. So if, you know, you spend 1 hour doing the work and it takes 10 hours to get it to the customer, then you've got a 10% flow efficiency. So it's a bit of a funny metric, but it can be used to show that. And ideally, like they've got a range, you know, it's like 60 to 80% is good, and anything else is not.
It's essentially this, right? It's a formula.
Yeah, it's a calculation based on that. Yeah. So rather than trying to visualize it, you know, horizontally, you can just create the a different metric on it.
So the reason I asked was, it's almost, if you had that percentage calculated along the way, and maybe they were ragged, then the opportunities for improvement could just be flagged. So either a visual of this is fucking long and this is too short or whatever, versus this is a 10% and this is a 1%. Let's focus on the 1% on it.
Well, I feel like opportunities could be really difficult, or they could be low hanging fruit, right?
As well, yeah.
So you could have people say, oh yeah, we can definitely just tell them to change their schedule, or, you know, like there could be really obvious practical first steps or something. Yeah, Haroon.
Yeah, and I think I really loved what Noel and Mike just said there. And I think to Mike's point, maybe something like this would be something that you might want to try out. So I think it's what you're talking about, Mike, isn't it? So in terms of visualization, can everyone see this kind of like screen, right? It's got a screenshot of it's got green and red, like post-it. So cool. And so to that effect, to make the point really clear, I think it was gamifying it, whether it's doing the value stream mapping, like having some kind of calendar or some visualization representative or visual representation across the board, like underneath your value stream or near it. If you have these kind of like, it doesn't have to be red or green, it could be any color you want, right? But to Mike's point, I think it's quite powerful because you can see quite clearly, even from a zooming out option, you can see, oh crap, we spend most of our red tickets where there's a lot of waste, a lot of wait between step 7 and step 9, right? Before we go to the board to ask for funding, and before this step. So this is Adidas Run for the Oceans event, for example. And here you've got what Noel said, which is flow efficiency, which is your value added time plus wait time. So your value added time, I think it's divided, but your value added time divided by the total lead time multiplied by 100, and having that very clearly expressed is quite helpful. But from my experience, my limited experience, flow efficiency at the value stream, or from your definition of it, Greg, the operational value stream level, actually agnostic of level, is around end to end in most big corporations is well under 20%. And that's not great, of course, right? Because of the long lead times, the wait times, the transportation costs, waiting for signatures, waiting for sign-offs, all of that waste in the system. Seldom have I come across an organization other than some scale-ups or startups or real cool, companies where they're excelling in that higher, percentages. Like Adidas had a flow efficiency of under 10%. 5% of the time, 95% of the time, they weren't doing squiddly dot, because of the wait times they had. And same with the investment banks, what I've seen right now. But I think to your point about the development value stream and op value stream, I find that I think in SAFe there is a distinction between the two. My understanding that there is a distinction, I think, from SAFe 6, SAFe 5.1, 4, and etc. I think any form of value stream mapping, because where it came from is Toyota Production System as we know it, and the Toyota model was, how can we get a group of different people from the organization to come together, not just once, but multiple times across the year, to re-visualize and reimagine the layers of the organization and where there's waste, and actually there's the 9 or 6 different levels of, or 7 levels of waste, right? So for them, it was not just a one-off activity. And that's what I'm finding right now in the industry, including Adidas and other companies. They do it once. Oh yeah, we're done now. We know our value streams, and happy days, right? We know where the problems are. We'll fix them whenever we can, and they forget about them. So I think the trick really is not just the mapping, but it's the continuous conversation and getting different people to view it and give an opinion, and also to experiment as well. Because the easy part is the mapping. The mapping is the easy part. You get some people together, you visualize it. The hardest part is done what? Don't know what happens. What do you do next?
Yeah, I've got a few reactions to that. So yeah, one in my context, like I do not know a lot of people at the client side, so I'm only exposed to the sort of area that I'm working with, which is very much kind of tech team with an RTE and stuff. So that's kind of a constraint on my end, but I can see the power of, like, if you had access to the whole business strategy side of things, then they could really have a massive impact. And then the other thing is, I'd love to be able to work value stream definition into an ongoing, evergreen, always revisit. I'd be interested to know whether you have any strategies for creating a pull for that, like creating a desire for that, because I think you're right. The tendency is to do one and done. Oh yeah, we did that, so we did it 8 months ago, so it's all good. Which, I mean, that's actually the case for us. We did it last July, and now we're doing a kind of a slightly different version of it now. But so I'd like to see it being done more and across, in different areas, etc. So I'd like to know, maybe Haroon.
Yeah, sure. Would you like me to respond now, or think Bart's had his hand up for quite some time?
Maybe separate, maybe offline. We can.
Okay, sure. I'll be happy to. Yeah, I've got a template. If anyone's interested, happy to again share afterwards. Just the template that I use, which is a bit different to your one, Greg. Not bad different, by the way. I think your template is absolutely fine. It doesn't matter what template you use. It's the conversation, as you mentioned, but having some goals and just zooming out of what the key value indicators are. KVIs, I think Scrum.org, they mention KVIs or key value indicators, but being very clear about how are you measuring value, because not everything is valuable, right? And some things are valuable to you, but they're not valuable to me. So how do you differentiate between those process steps? There's a whole thing around that, but I'm happy to share that offline. And if anyone else is interested, please let me know. I'm happy just to send you the screenshots of my template that I created for Adidas across the 7,000 team members. Happy to do that. I think Bart, you had your hand up first, and then you've got Christine, who had her hand up second, I think.
Yeah, I think you kind of started another topic which is interesting and big, which is what is value. But before I talk about the value, the small bits of learning that I can share here is that if you are going into a new organization that you don't know much about, then for me, what I found useful is finding a co-pilot or partner to work on this, who's somebody who knows the organization and who knows what is nonsense. And most of the time during value stream mapping is being taken by conversations once you do it. And some are valuable and some are just people venting or because they like to hear their voice. And having somebody on a team who knows which is which in a context that you don't know about, some kind of subject matter expert, is really valuable. I found it.
How did you find that person?
Yeah, that's like starting. Second, on kind of repeating it again, I think it's a matter of how good is the organization with operationalizing the findings. So can they do something about it? BP and the part that I worked with was really good at that. We did one value stream mapping, and they just took everything on board and started feeding that into the people who could do something about that. And 12 months later, we were in a totally different position. And that is kind of really helpful in terms of doing it again. If you can have some wins based on the previous value stream mapping, even if it wasn't fully implemented or something like that, if you have some wins, people will definitely want to do it again. Approach it again, refresh the findings, see what's still there. And then...
Christina, apologies. I just want to jump in, Bart, to respond to something which I forgot to say at the beginning, which is when I set these up with these teams, I wanted to make sure that it was clear that we need people in the session who understand the customer. And then if we're going to do development value stream, we need people who understand our current process. And if we don't have the right people, then we need to, reschedule. Sorry, I just it jumped in my head. I had to jump in there to make
that was also key. The key part for findings for BP. So they had such a long process from people selling the product to people actually producing the product that they forgot about what the quality is. And once we started talking about, they said, it's not only the people at the platform or processing vessel were saying, we are measured on how much uptime platform has and how many barrels we produce or extract from under the ground. And the people at the front were saying like, yes, but temperature, water content, things like that, like, quality of the product is also matters. That's what we sell, not necessarily the volumes. Volumes needs to be there, but it's secondary to some extent. And once they realized that and started working on improving parts of the value stream, they, from a product that was not accepted by some refineries, they changed their kind of perception on the market to the products that otherwise buy premiums to buy, basically. So getting that nailed down early in the process, I think it's very, very valuable.
So powerful. Yeah, Christina.
Yeah, I was just responding to what your kind of query, Greg, in terms of how do you get, I guess, people to engage and kind of focus on the continuous improvement. And what I found, so when I was at BT back in like 2017, the only reason why it really worked for them to begin with was that, I can't remember, he was like a chief strategy guy, but he was considered to be a visionary, and he was the sponsor in kind of ensuring that there was sign off on everybody getting lean practitioner training. So even when there was a merger with EE, all of the EE persons who joined the BT stream, they had to pay for a practitioner service certs for us. And I kind of think unless you somehow have that sponsor who has the backing, who people consider to be a visionary, and basically can write that checkbook to get everybody on board, that continuous improvement focus, I just don't see how it necessarily happens unless you can get that backing to kind of help shift the culture. I mean, I'd like to say things can be bottom up, but it's just not how it is when it has to do with money.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Ruth in just a second, but just to give you more context for me, it was like there was a challenge we were having. It's quite localized challenge, but there were people who are aware of the Scaled Agile rollout, and a lot of people outside of it wanted to jump in and join it. And we didn't really have a well-defined value stream, so there was a danger of people just like bolting on their teams to this lovely agile thing we were doing. And so in order for the RTE to be able to like ward off kind of unwanted, unneeded teams, we need to have a very clear value stream definition for the agile release train, so that she could just point to that and say, where do you figure into this value stream? Because if you don't, then you're probably in some other value stream. Go ahead, Ruth.
Hiya. I know my context is quite different, but one of the things that I find really powerful is by having the customer in the room. So in my world, obviously that's normally a patient or a service user, but often people think they know what the process is. Yeah. But then when you actually have the people there who do experience it, there'll end up being a bit of a debate about how that actually works in process. Now, I know, in any context, you can, I suppose that concept of co-production is really kind of strong in my world, but I do think I'm not quite sure why IT projects aren't really doing this more. Because when I worked in marketing a million years ago, we always had like focus groups or small kind of, we tried to make sure we had the right demographic in the room to test stuff with. So I do think there is an argument that we ought to be trying to push a bit harder to say, if we really want to understand the experience, and if we really want to understand the value from a customer perspective, because it will look like on a sheet, like those numbers might be like long for a wait, but actually if that wait is long for a reason and it's kind of has some value to the customer, the wait might not be a bad thing in your value stream. So sometimes there was, when we were mapping out decision-making processes, there'll be like, well, they were waiting, but they were doing something whilst they were waiting, which maybe was making a decision around, I don't know, whether they wanted to have cancer treatment or not. And actually having a couple of weeks to make that decision was a positive thing. But if you mapped it out, it could look like a negative thing. So I don't know, I just think there's something in there. And I found when I was doing the UX UI training that mapping the emotion that went alongside it that was really powerful in terms of really understanding, again, from a customer experience perspective. So I don't know, just a few additional kind of things to put into the mix there. And what we did in terms of continuous improvement is we really then tried to upskill the business so they could continually do this in their smaller teams to kind of, and we set up an academy to do that. But again, that's probably a longer conversation.
Yeah, that's a really good point about that. But and then like access to the customer, I think that's like the ideal scenario, right? If you're in a situation where you can get.
But we can push for it. Why, you know, if we don't ask for it, like I'm not on a job, just gone in, nobody, they're like, well, no one's ever asked for that before. But I said, well, I want to go and observe it. It's nothing more powerful than observing it or getting people in.
Yeah, and I think maybe by default we should advocate for it, like you said, and then see if we get shot down.
What's the worst they can do? Say no, isn't it?
Just a quick one to build on what Ruth said, and I've been trying to think how to answer Christina's challenge about how does this differ from kind of more, back in the day kind of current state and future state modelling, and I think it's you're not modelling what's happened, you're modelling what actually happens. So what inevitably happens is people take shortcuts through processes, or more often than not, they're forced to take long cuts, and they have to go all around the houses to make this thing happen. And then kind of coming back to my point, it's about visualizing that. And I think when you've got the customer or the client in the room, just getting them to see, oh my God, they have to get 8 levels of approval before this thing's allowed to come through. This thing isn't pulled through, it's pushed through, whatever it be. I think that's the real value in it. So it's really important. It's kind of discussional and what actually happens, and then it kind of exposes the culture as well, not just the process. I mean, the formal process is almost the least important thing.
I want to wait until Anjani's question, but Greg, do you want to reply to either Ruth or Toby's conversation? I think Toby made a really good point about Christina's follow-up question, but Anjani hasn't spoken, so I'm happy to go on mute, not speak until Anjani's got something to say.
I quite like getting the customer in the room. I think it's very powerful knowing what they see the change has brought about in their day-to-day life or value that they're looking for. One recent experience I had was we were doing cloud transformation, cloud migration, and we were supposed to automate something that was taking 4, 5, 6 days possibly. We wanted to bring it down to 2 hours. That was the ideal goal. However, when we got the customers in, they were deeply disappointed when we first showed the first iteration. They were like, this is not the UAT kind of version, or this is not ready to be proud of, something that we should be proud of. So I think getting the customer is great, but I think there's also some effort that goes into managing their expectations on a steady pace, as opposed to they expecting, oh, it's going from 5 days down to optimize down to 2 hours. They would be expecting in the first show and tell or something like that. So maybe if we can manage their expectations also, having customer in the room is absolutely good thing to have. Yeah. But how do we do that? I mean, has anyone worked in that?
Yeah, I've worked in that, so I've worked in it from the standpoint, you have to have really strong transformation leads who are able to kind of push back to the customer, because I've worked in toxic environments where the customer has so much leverage that they're literally kind of like holding a stick over people and they have no appreciation for the fact that the process is long and they just don't want to hear it. And the only way to kind of manage expectations is if you have somebody who is the sponsor for the overall thing and can kind of talk to the customer co-person and kind of go, hey, these are the issues that we're having. This is what we're trying to change, and we need engagement, but we want this to kind of be positive. And unless you have that, it then comes this kind of fighting thing of people who, unfortunately, who are doing the work, they can't fight with the customer in certain situations. So if you are having that problem, you need to get the biggest sponsor on your side who the customer values to kind of have those conversations, because you want the dynamic to not be toxic.
Greg, you're on mute.
I was gonna say, yeah, it's just so important, and it's almost like sometimes very delicate situation, and you need to have someone, like you said, who's strong in the ability to manage that in a very diplomatic way, right? So I think maybe the burden of that can be quite overwhelming, or just the being confronted with the notion of getting with some of the customers, you know, it can be.
The process map actually helps you present data. So if you start off, no matter how small that process map is initially, you can sort of show the customer, look, this is where we're at the moment. Where do you guys see your need that isn't reflected on our process map in our process, and the value? So because, you know, this is the stream, for instance, and these things need to be done, or this is the time it takes at the moment here. Can you see that we possibly need to work on this area because it's actually costing the whole chain a lot of time, and that's why we want to work on that. I mean, if you think downstream, your bit of value that you see is more important, then yeah. So for me, the service stream mapping, value stream mapping, and the product value stream mapping can be very powerful data tools to help with prioritization of whatever work needs to be done.
My counter to that, Mike, would be, I've seen so many senior or MDs or whatever who are kind of embarrassed to expose our process to a client, right, or to a customer, and like, oh, we have this really big problem with tech debt over here, and so therefore our releases take so long, and we have to have downtime. It's like, you don't want a customer to know about that, or at least they don't want that. Like, so transparency is their, you know, their enemy almost. So I don't know how to, I don't even know how to tackle that off the top of my head, but it's like a delicate balancing act. You know, you could present it in a different way, I suppose. It's a very customer view of it, right? Say, this is a black box where stuff happens. We're working on it. Yeah, hiding some of the embarrassing bits or something. Haroon, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just 2 points actually, possibly 3 if I can think of the third. I'll pass the baton over to Bart. But to Mike's point, I think there is value in the value stream, like representation, despite the transparency problem. And I'll say that in inverted commas because it exists. The transparency. One of the challenges of value stream maps is that it's too transparent sometimes, which obviously us agilists we love, right? But when it comes to our senior executives, it means that it's almost like the emperor's clothes, right? They're naked, they're literally naked, and they don't want to be that, right? So there are some, I mean, there's 2 tips I want to give. Done it at a few companies now, and if you get the right sponsor, I think Ruth and Christina alluded to this, And those of you who with a program management or project management background will appreciate this. The sponsorship engagement and who's sponsoring you or the group of people to do this initiative of value stream mapping, because it's not just one event. And even the one workshop, maybe multiple workshops, as Ruth said, right? Separate focus groups is super critical to the investment that you'll get in order to make the improvement. Your change program, your value stream program, or whatever this thing is, will get killed off because of lack of sponsorship engagement. It's not because of lack of the people on the ground on the field and want to do some good stuff. It is indeed the middle management and the top executives who will probably can it if they're not brought in. So my advice is, when I done it at Adidas, the senior vice president, which is equivalent to a global managing director in a bank or insurance company or a retail company, were fully engaged, were fully signed up for this, they were fully present. So what we had was we had something called value stream owners, more on the customer operation, sorry, more on the operational side, Greg, from a safe perspective, but not that indifferent to develops from a development stream either. But having some kind of a figure or group of people, probably not, it's best not to have a committee, but if you must, hey, fine, right? But put them in charge of the change, saying, look, they're going to do this thing, and you're accountable for the investment and the future experiments that we're going to do. Are you up for that? Because if you're not up for that, we're wasting our time here. We can produce some lovely visuals, but the goal is not that. The goal is to do this, right? So here's an example of just a cut of that, what I've done for another bank actually, with something like this. So, you know, just the top part of the mural, by the way, which is value stream owners, who's physically going to be owning this stuff and making sure that we get the funding to make the value stream funding and all that, and get that all sorted out. Who are the coaches around that? Who are the teams surrounding doing the work for the development value stream, right, part? What's the OKR? It doesn't have to be OKR, it could be mission alignment or goal alignment or whatever strategic way that you visualize your strategy. And then basically, let's map it out. It's as simple as that, really. But I do take the point what Mike's saying, which is in order to make it worthwhile, quantify the cost. So each step, quantify, not only in time, but give yourself, I don't know, at Legal in general, we actually quantified each process step. So it costs between, you know, £40,000 and £70,000 to release something from when it gets to the backlog to when it actually gets, you know, concept to cash. So actually quantifying the cost will attract your investment partner. So make sure you have this investment partner or a executive or a very senior person in the organization that is fully behind your, you know, your value stream mapping exercises. Otherwise, it's just going to be a vanity exercise, from my experience anyway.
Thanks for that.
Hope that was helpful.
Really good.
Was there a third one? You mentioned 3 and I counted 2.
I know you'd ask. I know some smart person would quantify me. Oh yeah, so the third thing is make sure, if you would like to, ensure that you've got the value proposition at least identified. Meaning, when we talk about the term value that Bart mentioned earlier, what do we actually mean by that? Are we all aligned in terms of what we mean by the word value? Because value could mean cost, it could mean sustainability, it could mean ESG goals, it could mean having good human societies. How are we quantifying and qualifying value, and where are the metrics? So in my exercise of value stream mapping, before we do it, I ask the sponsors and these executives, all these people, whoever's been around it, can you please describe to me what value the customer is currently receiving, and start with the customer. Start almost building the personas of who your customers are. And there's a bit of pre-work that I set for everyone before they even come to the first session to say, first of all, before you come, it'll take you 15 minutes, I kid you not, 15 minutes or less than 15 minutes. Identify who your customers are, identify what value is, identify what value they're receiving, and how are they pulling that value. That's it. And then when they come into the exercise, they've already mapped out, you know, in their own mind. Hopefully, then you just do a 1-2 for all grade. You say do a 1-2 for all and merge your things, right? And so that way you've got a shared understanding of what we are deeming or identifying as value. Because as Christina mentioned before, in process mapping or A3 thinking or A4 thinking, there is a very consistent message about waste. The 7 or 9, you know, elements of waste: transportation, weighting, people, blah blah. So are we clear about what we think waste is? Because in complex work that we do in product thinking, waste, as Ruth mentioned, doesn't mean weight, because waiting sometimes for the right customer is a good thing. So So being very clear about what your parameters are.
Weight does not equal waste. Yeah, Haroon, I'm glad you said that just now, because that actually.
You got a Teams call.
Me or someone else? Anyway, I'll come back to this. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, you said like I actually did this in my value stream session, which was identify the customer. What do we do for them, and then how does value flow, and what do they perceive us as delivering? Like what does the customer think we do for them? And then there's more detail to it too. There's like internal and external customers and stuff, but it's essentially that completely. I mean, maybe it's from the playbook, but what you just said completely validates.
Yeah,
version I did. So that's fantastic to hear that.
No worries. I'll just leave you with 1 or 2 books. I'm going to pass to Bart. Learning to See, very good. So it's actually like a workbook. You can get it from Amazon. The original value stream terminology comes from these 2 people who actually used to work at Toyota. One of them actually. It's called Mike Rowell. No, is it Mike Rowell? No, John Shook, I think his name is. He's probably in his 70s now, bless him, or 60s, but he's a lovely guy. He's actually a YouTube clip with Nigel Thurlow and John Shook, and you can watch this beautiful one hour clip, and he goes into the background about what value stream thinking is, why it came about, how they use it at Toyota. Obviously, from now it's something for many things, but if you're interested in the historicity behind it, it's from Toyota. And actually, the original article actually is from 1900s, from a separate thing, anyway, manufacturing, if you're interested. But there's a whole plethora of stuff. But all you really need to know is that there are some templates out there in the world. And if you're interested, I can share with you, Greg, and others, some templates and some stuff that might help you gamify with your teams. And more importantly, get the executive sponsorship that is required in order to make it a thing. Otherwise, it's just another project and this gets canned. Thank you.
There was a request for those names again. The video. Who were the names? Oh, we got a YouTube video. Okay, Christina's got it.
Yeah, John Shook and Nigel Furlow. Nigel Furlow is who I deem as quite high up there in terms of flow thinking. He used to be at Toyota in senior leadership positions. John Shook was, I think, his mentor, a colleague of his, and John Shook wrote the book or co-wrote the book called "Learning to See," and the tip is in the message. Value stream mapping is about learning to see together. And if you don't learn to see, if you just learn to see in silo, you're not really learning to see. You're just seeing something in silo.
So we're coming up on an hour now. I'm just wondering if there's anything outstanding or any kind of loose ends before we wrap it up.
I think Bart had his hand up. I don't know if you stood.
So it's up to you, Greg. Like you are the value owner of this call. You decide whether something is outstanding. I just wanted to say that, play the devil's advocate and say that Haroon did a nice plug into what I was going to say, which is if you don't have many touch points with customers, the value stream mapping exercise for them is just waste of time most of the time, because if you define based on what they say or research you have about them, what's the start point, then that's one touch point with them. And then when you deliver the value, that's the end point. And that's the last touch point with them, right? Unless you have a process that delivers them value incrementally over time, multiple places, then it's kind of a waste of time for them to participate in it.
All right, yeah. So it's just your take on that customer involvement piece. So yeah, if you had multiple engagements along the way with them, it would make more sense. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, this is hugely helpful to me. And I did originally ask, and a bunch of people piled on and said, "Oh my God, I want to join." Right. So I think it's a very hot topic for us, but it's extremely hot topic for me, and I'm very, very thankful to this group. This group has just been so amazing for me and saved my life a few times, I think.
One of the bigger tips that I have on my list that I don't think anyone mentioned, but might be useful for you, is apart from what you had on your picture, which is like value flow, what I used to do with people is information flow on the top. So like people who are involved and what documents they are sending, what is the process. So most of the time people waste time, or maybe not waste time, but they deliver information about I based my decision based on this forecast, or somebody prepares this for me, or we write this document. It doesn't deliver value per se. It kind of drives the process to some extent. If you know what I mean, it's like there's a lot of those conversations like, yes, this flows decision, whatever, and people want to put it somewhere and they start putting it into steps, which actually are not steps of the process, just how information flows. So that's what I tend to do at the top above the flow, just to show who's sending it, what kind of info to people, and that frees up and clarifies the flow for you.
I love that. I love that. I have not included that in my approach, so I'm gonna look at that as well. All right, we've been here an hour. I think maybe we should probably wrap it up. I think it's been an amazing conversation. I feel like I didn't really respond or take in everything. I'm gonna have to watch the video again to really let it all sink in. There's so much to it, but yeah, I appreciate everyone contributing and asking questions and engaging. And I guess we can stop the recording. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'm going to end the call. I need to jump on a call as well, but thank you, Greg, for making it happen, really, and giving others the opportunity to understand and hear about value streams or value stream mapping.
I want to download the chat, save chat. There we go.
Yeah, feel free to. I'll keep it open for now. I think in Zoom now, the chat now remains always open, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, Haroon, because I'm like, I've not used it yet, and I'm interested to see what this continuous chat thing is.
Yeah, so continuous chat means that it will always be open, I think, until I die.
Let's share. I think Ruth maybe was going to share some stuff on here, so let's share some stuff.
Yeah,
across.
Let's do that. Yeah, let's do that. For some reason I can't. For some reason I need to change the condition because it's basically doing. It's not letting me upload the file. I'll just upload some screenshots, but I'll do that. I'll do that. I mean, if you're comfortable, you can send me your email address on WhatsApp, and I will send you some of the stuff that I mentioned, like the value stream template, the exercise I mentioned. If you're interested, if you're not interested, that's okay too.
I'm very interested.
Julio, all right, and Greg, if you want a conversation to follow up, I'll message you, my friend, if you want, and we can link up again. We'll do something like this again if you want.
Thank you, and please share on the main channel once you have the video recording.
Will do. I think it takes about an hour or half an hour, doesn't it? Or less than that, I think. It's an hour video, so yeah, as soon as it's ready, I will post a link to it, and hopefully it's ready available.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, folks.
Bye.
See you.